Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the TV Pilot's License Flight Number 3, with service to Lynbrook, Long Island. We ask that you please fasten your headphones at this time and secure your podcasting device, and make sure to smell your nearest baby to steal their youth.
Ah, Deborah!
Welcome to the TV Pilot's License podcast. I am Jeff Curvis, joined by Max Singer and Rich Inman. How y'all doing?
Hey guys. Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling like I'm like a schlub who hit the lottery.
Oh man, the Mets are in first place. We're talking about one of the greatest multicam sitcoms in American history. Life is good.
Are we talking about King of Queens?
No, the other one in Long Island.
I can't wait.
You know, if you're joining us for the first time, first of all, welcome. Make sure to subscribe for future awesome episodes. And why don't you take back a look at the other two that we've done so far? But for those who may be just joining for the first time, Max, why don't you tell the folks at home what this podcast is about?
Ah, Deborah! So, welcome to TV Pilot's License. We're going to take you on a cross-country flight looking back at some of the most famous or infamous pilot episodes of TV shows, some of which you may know and love, some of which you may have never seen. We're going to figure out what works, why they're successful, and whether or not we should all keep watching them.
Yeah, and you know, today, if you did not know, we're talking about Everybody Loves Raymond. A very much known as a classic sitcom, but very much a classic American laugh track based sitcom. And Rich, prior to watching this podcast, what was your relationship like with the American sitcom?
So right now we're covering Everybody Loves Raymond, which is in the peak boom of the let's give a stand-up comedian a ton of money to do a show based around how they grew up or about their material. This is prime 1996 television, and I'm super excited to get into it.
For those who have never watched Everybody Loves Raymond, a little bit of a synopsis. We are introduced to Ray Barone, who is a successful sports writer and family man who deals with a brother and parents who happen to live across the street. Mom Marie loves to meddle in his life, while older brother Robert sometimes resents his success, and Dad Frank just makes comments and raids the fridge. You know, with that background, Max, can you tell us a little bit of background of how this show was made?
All right, so ahead of the show's premiere on September 13th, 1996, we're going to chat a little bit about creator Phil Rosenthal and his involvement with Ray Romano and how this came to be. So Ray Romano, kind of as Rich mentioned, is on this swing of stand-up comics who are getting cast in things. Romano was actually in the original pilot for News Radio, but was fired from its cast because his sort of cerebral talking type of stand-up didn't mesh with how like quick and bantery the rest of the cast was. So Romano gets fired before the actual 2-air pilot gets made. Yeah, and he gets replaced by Joe Rogan.
One of my favorite shows of all time. Just News Radio would have been, I guess, markedly worse if they didn't have Joe Rogan. That is mind-blowing to me. That is so not his humor. I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, you're not the only one who thought that, Rich. He got fired.
Yeah, you know, it does make you
and
wonder
promoted.
What would have happened if Ray Romano stayed on News Radio and instead maybe Joe Rogan has an Everybody
Loves Rogan. Well, see, that's the problem, is that everyone loves Joe Rogan. It's a real issue.
Oh my God.
Joe Rogan, definitely a friend of the pod. So please
friend of the pod,
podcast.
Friend of the pod, Joe Rogan. He comes by my house every now and then and drinks banquets with me.
Ray Romano, he's getting back into staff after getting let go from News Radio. He does a 5-minute set on The Late Show with David Letterman, and he gets a development deal from CBS because
for 5 minutes.
Because this is the 90s and this is how TV got made. You did 5 minutes on Letterman and you got a TV show deal.
This is so angering.
So Phil Rosenthal, he's a staff writer on Coach with Craig T. Nelson, and he had previously submitted a spec script for an episode of Frasier that he wrote to Worldwide Pants, which is David Letterman's production company.
Who doesn't make Frasier.
And because of their reaction to his Frasier spec script, they put him into a small list of like a dozen potential showrunners, and he gets a one-on-one meeting with Ray Romano because, again, this was the 90s, and this is how TV got made and how things worked. If you are listening to this episode and you are an aspiring TV writer or you want to be an actor in a sitcom,
here's how to build a time machine.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, go back to 1995. Apparently, it was a lot easier. So Romano and Rosenthal, they take a meeting together. They get to know each other, and Rosenthal basically writes this script mimicking Ray Romano's real life experience as much as possible. There's a lot of character names that are either exacts from Romano's life or super close to it. The actual show title came from Ray Romano's real life brother commenting him on winning something called a Cable ACE Stand-Up Award, which sounds like it was a short-lived award given out to comedian sets on cable shows. So everything here is sort of just picked from Romano's life and then stretched out to be a 30-minute multicam sitcom because, again, it was the 90s, and that's just how these things worked.
Yeah, it definitely, if you look at the 90s, it seems like if you were even somewhat a well-received comedian, you got a pilot, baby. And Everybody Loves Raymond was no exception. With that background on the show, let's just jump into the pilot. We talked a little bit about the synopsis. Instead of taking the Seinfeld route of being a stand-up comedian, Ray Romano chose his career to be a successful sports writer living in Long Island, and we are brought into a house of children screaming at Patricia Heaton's character of the known and shouted, "Deborah! Deborah!" And Deborah is coming close to, at least in terms, the idea of having a panic attack surrounded by toddlers when Ray Romano comes to the rescue. But I was fully expecting, knowing this is a laugh track show, for the audience to applaud Ray entering the room and him to take a small pause.
Oh no. You only got 5 minutes on Letterman. You don't get an applause on the intro. This isn't I Love Lucy.
When you saw this hectic scene, what were your initial thoughts of what we were getting into?
I mean, you've just got these like little dinky jazz chords underscoring, and then a stressed out woman and a man comes in doing the bare minimum, and it's just such an archetypical like 90s sitcom moment right from the top.
Yeah, this is big schlub dad energy. This is you get in immediately with the script. He doesn't know his twins apart from each other. He applauds himself for feeding himself. Like, these are jokes that are very much taken out of time.
Yeah.
And
minimal applause for Ray Barone up top on his entrance, but oh man, does the audience love hearing him say the word cookie 3 times and giving out cookies to his kids. That tickled that audience.
Yeah, we've talked about how every parent has their own parenting style in previous podcasts. Ray has a very specific type of parenting style, which is, I will do anything necessary to get these children to be quiet, even though I supposedly wanted all 3 of them.
Oh, 100%. And, I think, so we get in our very first, Deborah. Everyone do it with me. Deborah!
Deborah! Deborah!
A minute and 30 into this episode. They wasted absolutely no time getting into the taglines.
Yeah, and after this cold open, we get something that just seemed entirely out of place. We get the 4th person wall break where Ray decides to tell us all the exposition we need and basically gives us a synopsis of the pilot off the top of the pilot.
Let me paint a little picture. You're coming home from elementary school. Your parents aren't home because they have jobs. You're flipping on the TV. You're flipping on to WGN at 4 in the afternoon. You're going to see something. If it's one of those rare days where you get a rerun of something and you get the juicy, long intro credits scene, when you first saw that long like Fresh Prince theme for the first time. It is mind blowing. And when I saw Ray Romano breaking the fourth wall after only have ever seeing like the intro credits being 8 seconds long and just a little piano riff, he explains the entire story to the camera, exposition style, and I have no idea why they chose to do that.
What I thought was so funny is I watched this show on Peacock, and Peacock gives you the option to skip intro during that fourth wall segment up top, and it's like, man, if I skip this, I have no idea what's going on, because you just kind of jump into this world. You're there. There's no intro to anything. It's just a day in the life right off the bat.
It just seemed like they were trying way too hard. I will admit, Ray getting stuck in the playpen was I was chuckling a little bit. I was like, so we automatically know that Ray, while somehow being a great sports writer, is also a complete moron. But as soon as we're taken out of this exposition-filled intro, we do come to find out that Ray does sort of help around the house. You know, the house goes from being a complete pigsty to Ray, you know, helping out with a couch cushion here and there. And we're introduced to the mother who lives across the street. Any thoughts about, you know, just in-law breaking into your home without notice?
I just feel so horrible for Deborah for every single minute of this show. I'm like, why on earth did you subject this poor woman to having her own in-laws like on the same block of the house, having subjecting her to her husband's brother, who's another schlub? Like, can't find some separation.
Deborah, there is a chain lock on the door. We see it in the background. I am begging you to use it.
Yeah, and, you know, Deborah definitely, we can tell from the start, is someone who loves the concept of boundaries. And we find out, you know, like the main plot point of this episode is Deborah's birthday is on Sunday, right? And she just wants to celebrate with the kids and Ray wants his entire family there, but Deborah says, please, no, thank you. But we really it almost seems like Ray is a prisoner to his parents or has Stockholm syndrome of some type, as we find out in the bedroom when the first of many attempts by Ray to seduce his wife with very little to no attempt to have foreplay whatsoever.
Oh man, yeah, really just put in the bare minimum. This guy fluffed one pillow and he thinks he's getting some tonight.
Oh yeah, I think this is like just the quintessential 90s like romance thing of like having like for characters that have kids where they're just like, sex is kind of becoming not taboo on mainstream TV again, and it's truly like they just gotta hammer that in at every single possible moment. They're married, they have too many kids, they're stressed out, but they're definitely gonna have sex in it.
I do want to say one thing. There was one joke that, you know, I was like, okay, this was a great joke. And it was Ray going through what he had to do to get Deborah to accept his marriage proposal.
The three attempts.
Oh, that was really good.
The 3 attempts and the joke of, you know, the rule of threes literally playing out in a joke was something that I very much appreciate. We do end up meeting Ray's brother, played by Brad Garrett, Robert, and Ray's dad, played by the late Peter Boyle, Frank Barone. I will say that, you know, we learn a little bit of background from Ray and Deborah. It sounds like Robert's a police chief who is 40 years old and lives with his parents and might suffer from OCD based off of some of the tendencies. And, you know, it was the late 90s, so OCD could still be a little bit funny.
Are we going into Dr. Jeff's diagnosing corner?
You know, we have had previous episodes where we do diagnose issues of certain people. We think that
we're only 3 in.
Vinny Chase can't read. Very much known based off of
I just want to make it very clear. I want to make it very clear that the inability to read is not a mental deficiency.
It's crazy.
He might also have tinnitus, but maybe it's the theme of audio issues being in our podcast.
I'm looking at our seat back in our flight, and I see a safety card. I see a barf bag. I see a Skyball. I didn't know they made those anymore, and a copy of the DSM. Wow.
But I was gonna say, I think that we might have our second auditory issue based characters, because are all of the Barone family partially deaf as they are screaming at each other in every single instance of this episode?
Well, you see, Doris Roberts, who plays Marie, one of like the longest IMDb pages I've ever read in my life. She continually slaps each character, which I really wish they kept that in the show for as long as they possibly could before it got tiresome, because her slapping characters as she walks by is like the most like fake Long Island thing I've ever seen, and I loved it so dearly. But I really don't think, I mean, personally, Brad Garrett in this role is one of my favorite TV sad sack characters of all time, because God, does he absolutely nail it with the face acting and his voice. This role like put him in a place where he could do a ton of voice acting after this, because he became so heavily associated with the sad sack character.
Yeah, and everything he says, it feels so intentional the way he says it. Whereas Ray is a little bit more like slapdash. He's a little more high strung. Some of his lines maybe feel a little throwaway. Like everything Robert says, like it's super intentional. It's super concise. It's really cutting you to your core. And also, just shout out to Brad Garrett for saying the name of the title of the show in the pilot.
He got that distinct privilege. There is something that I do want to bring up, but first,
he got a sad card with that.
Let's move through this pilot, because there isn't much that happens, but there is so much that happens in this 20 minutes of television. Ray gives Deborah the night off from the kids. Oh, what a great man! And while putting
husband of the year,
while putting the kids down to sleep, we meet the villain of this show. I don't know if Leo is in anything past the first episode, but I instantly had the question, and I asked my wife, who is responsible for this man and this car crash of a human being who just comes in and says, we need to go and get pizza at like 10 o'clock at night while no one is home.
He does seem very much like a comedian that Ray Romano owed a huge favor to. And that's really it seems like the only reason they wrote him in, but he is like, he might only be in this one episode, but I do not recall him being part of the show whatsoever as the foil.
Yeah, it's definitely just a very interesting, like, oh, hey, we need to cause some sort of chaos, and an introduction for Marie, Robert, and Frank to all come over and just screw up everything. It was a very I Love Lucy moment in this show.
Yes.
As soon as Ray left, and, I say this very kindly, Ray Barone being somewhat the character of organization amongst the nuclear Barone family, everything went chaotic. Like, what did you think as soon as Ray left that house? What were you thinking when you saw the Trouble 3 playing around in Ray's house?
Oh, I hope the pizza was worth it, Ray, because you have just set off a chain of events that I don't think you're ready to handle. It's so clear that Ray's family is like the masters of their home, Ray's home. I'm sure they do this to other people in the neighborhood as well. And he's just dominated by these really strong personalities. Like, it really is just like a battle of will all against Ray.
Yeah, there are some gems in the scene. Looking at Patricia Heaton, Brad Garrett, Doris Robert, Peter Boyle, they all are such strong actors, and they do such a great job with their roles and what they're given. And it leaves you thinking, I know Ray Romano was the reason the show was made, but Ray Romano is also the worst actor of the four. And that is saying a lot, because Ray Romano has turned into a fantastic actor over time. Yeah. He's absolutely, I love his character in The Big Sick. I think it is just such an amazing acting job, but you're literally surrounded by knockouts,
Yeah,
heavyweights within the
what
world.
hasn't been said about Welcome to Mooseport at this point? But it's true. You know, he's with absolute giants of TV comedy with Peter Boyle and Doris Roberts. These just legends of the screen, and he really is just this everyman where things happen around him. It's really interesting because he is our protagonist, but it's that sort of older style of comedy where it's just everything is happening around Raymond and he's caught in the middle of the situations, at least in the pilot, versus him driving the situation itself. You know, he feels like there's just catastrophe all around him and it's his job to navigate the storm.
Absolutely. We do get some pretty funny instances, though. So, couple questions. Because Frank Barone, right? I love this character because it's just the stereotypical, like, older man just doing things to do things. Like, seems like he's a pretty decent grandfather. I have to think that maybe Frank Barone might be slightly supernatural as he tries to steal the youth of his twin grandsons by sniffing their heads and waking them up from being dead ass asleep, which I immediately said, you know what? I wouldn't talk to, a relative if they woke my children up from being
100%.
dead asleep.
100%. I think the most spoiled potential of any of the actors so far has been Frank's character. So far. You know, they do give him more agency and stuff like that. He's kind of just like the schmo grandfather at this
dad,
point. Yeah, he's like, I mean, we also get an extremely mid-90s take on Victoria's Secret, and that being a taboo point of the plot. And then
everyone having a different pronunciation of Brazier.
Yeah. and Bustier.
Yes.
Yeah, that was truly terrific. But I think, because Peter Boyle's a legend, Young Frankenstein, one of my favorite movies of all time, and then immediately did Taxi Driver afterwards. Like the guy's got range. I think they gave him the least amount to work with so far in the show, but he does get to be more of himself or going on. But I really there's not a lot to like about Frank in that first episode at all.
I do love the joke, though, of Ray telling his dad time to buckle up and hit the road. He stands up and puts his pants back on.
So I was about to ask, would you ever feel comfortable unbuckling your pants at someone else's home?
Oh, sure. I mean, if it's, if it's a relative, you know what I mean? Like, it's different if you're, old as hell, don't really care about the image anymore, and, might be too full to sit down and watch the end of a game, which seems to be taking place at, midnight on a weekday. Which, a time when famously most football games take place.
Yeah, Frank is definitely watching a game on NFL Classic that he saw 40 years ago.
Pushing us forward, Deborah inevitably comes home to the wild and chaos after her girls' night, and Ray is trying to, shepherd or herd everyone to their places, the children back to bed, the parents out of the house, to which it forces Deborah to have a conversation with Ray of, your parents cannot come over for my birthday. And although this was not a critical plot point as far as the jokes that came to the next scene, there was the best joke of the entire episode, which was this fruit of the month joke that Doris absolutely murdered. Any thoughts on just this great, Doris Roberts absolutely just taking over a scene?
Yeah, I think it just proves the ability of a great comic performer to be able to escalate something that is so simple and mundane as not understanding how a Fruit of the Month Club delivery service works and blowing it into this absolute mountain of a situation. And then once you throw Peter Boyle into it as well, the two of them just team up against Ray. To me,
Hey, you talking about the pears?
Yeah.
Like, this
Everyone's
is
upset
such a
about the
divisive
pears.
issue
yeah,
about the
just
pears.
is this gonna be forever? What do I do with all of this? And then the final beat of Ray leaving with the pears and the defeat from his brother about why does Raymond get the pears? It's so funny. It's great from all angles. It's definitely a joke that's indicative of what potential this show has, and I think it's definitely like the sharpest bit of comedy in the pilot.
I want to go over a bit that was the least sharp bit of comedy in the entire thing, which was Raymond going from, I think I'm having sex, to fluffing a pillow saying, good old sex, to then saying, I'm going to do new stuff. And that's the end of the line.
The I'm gonna do new stuff and the defeated line reading of pizza when Deborah asks him why he left. It's clear what the allure of Ray Romano is that he just has this sort of aloof, drawn out persona. But man, good old sex is really a mid 90s dude sitcom kind of line to have delivered from your main character.
They make all this big deal about the birthday party, right? And we don't even see the birthday party that happens, but we do see they put up decorations as if they had 30 people over to their home. And Ray and Deborah are cleaning up as the kids have been put down for a nap. We get the additional jokes of, oh, well, it's someone's birthday, so we're going to have sex on the birthday because that's what you do. And Ray gives the line of, it's not even, we usually only do this on my birthday. But then we do get the additional chaos of coming to the head of like what this big arc is of Ray's family might be a little bit too overbearing. And Ray finally has the showdown with his parents as far as you guys can't come over nearly as much as you can.
This is like the least built up, like peak moment in an episode ever. Like there's no real escalation in this argument. He like kind of stands up for himself while mostly looking at his shoes and back at his wife. Like, yeah, I guess this is the big triumphant moment of the pilot, but man, is that low stakes.
I would say it fell flat for me, right? Like you stand up to your parents, right? That's the goal. You are a nearly 40-year-old man. Which, you know, let's just dive into this. Ray Romano is nearly 40 years old. His 40-year-old brother is living with his parents. How old is too old to be that close to your parents?
Well, that's where I think the biggest indicator that something might not be mentally okay with Robert would be is I don't know if it's like fixing stuff up as an OCD thing. I think it's the fact that he has a very stable job. It seems.
He's a police sergeant.
Yeah,
he's never going to get fired.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. It's not a low-ranking job where his job is consistently on the line every single moment, but it is. There's no real reason so far that explains. Oh yeah, he needs to be at home. There is except that everyone's just like completely cool with it, which makes me think, yeah, there might be something wrong with him. In which case, maybe he shouldn't be a police officer.
Well, I think it just raises questions about their relationship to both their parents, because it's clear that Robert hasn't left the nest and still has an attachment issue there. Ray only barely is doing better in the sense that he's married and has a family, but he's clearly still indebted to them in so many ways. Their home is across the street. I'm pretty sure his parents have been living there longer. I don't think Deborah wanted to buy that house on that street. And so you just kind of wonder, like, what kind of relationship there was in that home growing up where neither of them, despite their individual successes, felt comfortable branching out on their own.
It's one of those interesting points of you need to have the chaos agent for a sitcom to have any flow. There has to be that person, that thing, or that principle that is allowing.
Boy, do they have a lot of them.
Yeah, for allowing for the show to continue or for the reason for you to tune in every week. And this does seem very much like they are pulling from that traditional American, hey, what is the problem? Who's going to be the reason or I use the term buffoon, but the buffoon that is going to cause this chaos all the time. And this show has 4 of them, and they're all holding Deborah prisoner in the moment. So really, when we look at this show, right, like, and we look at the things that happened amongst that very paper thin plot, what were some of the things that you actually did really like about this pilot?
I think they do a really great job of doing physical comedy and very very good like face acting for these line reads. I think a lot of the pauses, normally pretty indicative of a laugh track show or like filmed in front of a studio audience type show. I feel like especially for Robert, you get a lot of really good moments with his pauses because his voice is already so low. He speaks so slowly. He has these really good one-liners. He really knows how to close out a scene. When you have that extra pause, and not just for the purpose of laughter, I think that really adds on to it.
When you do multicam, you're playing to an audience or not just playing to a camera that's right in front of you. And Doris Roberts and Peter Boyle just do that so well. They chew on the scenery. They play to the back of the house. They are so much bigger than the rooms that they're in, and that's such a really nice, again, like the physical comedy of this show. And I really do like the relationship between Ray and Robert, even though it's not super clear right now. But it's just clear that it's clear enough that there's like a rivalry here. And Robert's line of
That's fully one-sided.
when I go to work, people shoot at me. When Ray goes to work, people do the wave, and then he sits down and eats a hot dog. Like it's such a delightful line. It's such a like out of time line. It's clear that Phil Rosenthal loves the old like kind of Norman Lear-esque comedy that feels very like All in the Family, the delivery on that line. But yeah, seeing the way those brothers interact is really fun, and it makes me want to know more about their history and their relationship.
There's definitely something that is really impressive about this show. And what I mean by that is this show was set up to be successful. If you look at Ray Romano being amongst a group of juggernauts as far as sitcom acting. Sitcom acting is very hard. It is not something that comes naturally to a lot of people, where you have to be prepared to take pauses for the cued in laughter. You have to be willing to perform in front of a large group of people and treat every single scene as if it is a different sketch. And somehow, although this is a pilot, we definitely know that Ray Romano is not comfortable in this space. They all do a fairly good job. And there are some jokes in here that we've been talking about that absolutely hit. And, even though there's something that is tired about the American sitcom already by this point, and we're not even at the point of the Big Bang Theory in the late 2000s popping up, there is something that just says, you know what, this show does have the opportunity to go quite a while.
It is so quaint and low stakes compared to what we see on TV today. And it's hard to imagine a show where the bar for what the action is and like what's driving the characters is like where it is in Everybody Loves Raymond. But there's also something that's so like spoon-fed and comfort food about it. Like it's the kind of show that you can all sit down and watch together, that, you can tune in casually. Rich, you mentioned coming home and popping on WGN, and it's just on, and you could just sort of jump right into it. You don't need to follow it week to week. You can just kind of pick at it here and there, little morsels of probably pizza.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to pay attention to every single word of this show to have a good time watching it. There's going to be throwaway lines. There's going to be stuff that's like building up to a joke and everything. But I mean, now that I think about it a little bit more, it is really impressive how they're able to create a genuine laugh in those, like, in the multicam studio. I was listening to a great interview of one of the director of Cheers and the Friends pilot and stuff like that. And what he used to do was he would actually sabotage takes in studio that he knew were going to be like flubbed, basically. And because you really do need that first laugh. You do not get a second take laughter on in those moments. And, that is a lot of pressure to be under, which is why I think you have to go with Doris Roberts and Peter Boyle. I don't know how much. I don't know how many like high profile things Patricia Heaton and Brad Garrett did before this. I know Ray Romano didn't do much, but I think that's why you really need those people who are super solid, which is why in like Big Bang Theory you have like people who have Broadway experience, and like it's also probably why a lot of those sitcoms don't work now, and because people are used to having to do multiple takes on something, so you're basically rehearsing a play the entire time, and you have to nail it, otherwise you're going to miss that laugh entirely, and when you do, you're going to have to cut that scene. Which makes me appreciate this a lot more, honestly.
Yeah, I believe I love that you called it comfort food, Max, because this is something that can be served to everyone, if that makes sense. I could very easily see turning on this pilot with, my in-laws or my extended family, and everyone being able to relate with moments and jokes within this. That doesn't mean there weren't wait a minute moments, and I had a very major one, and it's a continuing joke of the idea that the Italian family and the Jewish family are interchangeable, because although it's not explicitly stated, I definitely got the vibes that the Barones, while definitely not a Jewish last name, could very much be Jewish.
Well, it's the famed Italian-Jewish alliance, which is that we're allowed to play each other in film and television, and
did that get renewed?
Our families are very similar. You look at a George Costanza; he fits the Jewish-Italian alliance. Everyone in this show fits the Italian-Jewish alliance. Honestly, The Sopranos, despite the overt Italianness, the Italian-Jewish alliance.
Yeah, it's definitely something that stuck out to me. Were there any other wait a minute moments for y'all as far as looking at this show?
I think just Ray's outdated look of sex and the male trope of sex is only for birthdays, and him using sex as like a reward for doing a chore around the house. It feels like they really lean into that for multiple humorous beats throughout this pilot, and it just makes it seem like just such a schlub.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is very much like I think a pretty well-worn territory of main character tells a couple white lies and it just accumulates on him, and that's where all the drama lies in. I don't think there's any other like, oh, I gotta see this, or you can't miss this particular moment type thing, except for that the kids are swapped out at the end of, or like for this pilot, and the replacement kids go for almost the entire run of the show, which is super funny to me that they use different kids for the pilot, swap them out, and then let the other kids have like endless money on this run.
Those babies actually went on to do news radio.
That was Joe Rogan.
Y'all talked a little bit about the concept of this show possibly having outdated norms as far as certain jokes. It brings me to the question, do we think this pilot could be made today, and what differences would need to happen if we were going to try to make this today?
I really don't think so. I think I think we're so well past this territory. Obviously we have the Chuck Lorre sitcoms, which had the extremely long run compared, which I think he was like the close predecessor to Phil Rosenthal for this kind of like comedy. But I really don't think there's an interest right now in multicam. And I know we do have the spinoff of How I Met Your Mother, which they're trying out. I think we're just like so far past. We have the ability to view something as beautiful as like a Severance on Apple TV. That's like so visually stimulating, has comedic moments, has a crazy story. I don't know if there's much of a market right now for something that's kind of like turn your brain off and giggle at like a grown man trying his best.
I feel similar, but for different reasons. By golly, is CBS still trying hard to make the multicam a relevant thing. They still have new ones every single season to various degrees of success. But I just think that the American public wants higher stakes in their TV and in their TV comedies. You look at the various shows that feature just a comic and their life, and they feel more urgent. And everything about Everybody Loves Raymond, it feels suburban and quaint and a slower pace. And I just think that for a show like this to get made today, it would need more oomph going on beat to beat, but it also wouldn't work with like what this show is. I think it's such a nice time capsule piece of mid 90s American TV. I get the allure of it, but I just think that it's something that's going to be stuck in 1996.
Yeah, it's definitely that family-friendly sitcom that belongs on CBS. We've seen CBS, as you said, Max, really try to continue the fire that they were able to hit even up until a few years ago when they stopped Big Bang Theory, which was one of the longest running sitcoms of all time. I think I know the answers, but I'd love to hear from y'all. Would you continue watching this show?
So I almost gave this an episode 2. I know this is not something that I like comedies that are not serial. I like the episodic comedies because you can kind of tune in and out. Obviously there's going to be a lot more room for jokes, for letting like Doris and Peter have like their moments where their like character actually evolves a little bit more than just being the annoying person. But if there is I don't think there's a lot keeping me watching it on a regular basis. This just seems like it's made specifically for, spin the wheel, give me an episode. It doesn't matter what season. And I think that's why it's perfect for syndication.
I would not intentionally go about watching the rest of this show, especially given its 210 episode run. But I do have cable TV, so the odds are 1 in 4 channels will have Everybody Loves Raymond playing on it when I flip through them. So
that and Shawshank Redemption.
I would not actively continue watching this show, but I don't think I have a choice in passively continuing to watch this show.
Well, I was going to say, I know both of you gentlemen are new subscribers to Peacock, so I'm very sad to hear that you will not be binging through Everybody Loves Raymond on Peacock.
I paid $4.99 to do this episode, folks.
Also not a sponsor, but you can also watch soccer on Peacock, so that's a great thing.
We are so heavily invested in this show now. $4.99 to watch Raymond. That's unbelievable. I did want to, before we keep going or like start landing the plane, I did want to posit a little bit of a game for both of you. It's going to be a little upsetting. So buckle the hell in. It's time for Rich's Raymond Jeopardy. Okay, so our players today are Jeff Kurbis and Max Singer.
Really happy to be here, Rich.
Jeff, thank you for joining us all the way from Minnesota. Max, currently in our Burbank Sound Studios where we filmed the moon landing. I wanted to ask you both, who on the Raymond cast do you think has the most nude scenes in their history as an actor? And please explain your answer.
Oh no, this is I can't. Oh God, I'm shell shocked.
It's ruin your child Fridays here at ruin your childhood.
Let's just swing for the fences on this one. I'm gonna say that it's definitely Peter Boyle. Peter Boyle definitely is just showing up buck naked, and long live the king.
I'm going to go with Ray Romano because in the Ice Age movies, Manny the woolly mammoth does not wear any clothes.
Wow. Okay, so if we are going off
Ray
of
Romano recorded nude in the studio.
Okay, those are your final answers. I want to congratulate Mr. Jeff Kurbis because it is Mr. Peter Boyle.
Oh, yeah.
He has 2 movies where you see his full ass.
Editor, that is myself. Note, put the ding 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 in. So I will say,
Also, Ray Romano does have a nude scene in Vinyl.
Ooh. So I will just sum up, and as we are landing this plane, I will say, Max, I definitely share your thought. This show did receive syndication. It was on TBS TV Land and Comedy Central. As you said, there were 9 seasons, 210 episodes. And they did win and receive a number of Emmy Awards, a number of SAG Awards, and a Writers Guild Award as well. This show is definitely something that if it was on and I happened to be clicking on channels, I would watch it. But there's never going to be that purposeful intent just based off of the pilot. Now, maybe if I watched a few more episodes, I'd be convinced of something different. But in the meantime, as we land this plane, any final thoughts? And I'd love to hear where to find you, gentlemen.
Really quick, this show is not just syndicated on American TV. There's like 31 different versions of Everyone Loves Raymond worldwide that are pretty much beat for beat the show. There is a documentary called Exporting Raymond, which follows creator Phil Rosenthal traveling to Russia to get a Russian update of this show made. It's super fascinating. Give it a stream if you want to learn about like the broad global appeal of this. If you don't, you can find me on all things social media at Maxwell Singh. You can find comedy from myself and Rich Inman at Dadwagon Comedy on TikTok.
Absolutely. And if you want to shout at me in my Instagram comments that I should work on my Ray Romano impression a little bit more and make it a little bit more Kermit the Frog, you can shout Deborah to me at Damn That's Rich on Instagram. And yeah, give us a follow on Dadwagon Comedy.
And then you can find me at RunJeffRun on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at TV Pilots License. And you can also shoot us an email if you have a question or you're curious about future episodes. Make sure to subscribe to us at Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, if you remember anything about Everybody Loves Raymond,
Deborah! See you next week.